la storica emittente radiofonica in inglese della Costa Azzurra, la monegasca Riviera Radio. È stata riacquisita qualche mese fa da Capitol di Londra, o meglio da Global. Il gruppo ha rinnovato gli studi e l'immagine e ha lanciato una poderosa campagna promozionale tradizionale, ma ha aggiunto nel sito dell'emittente un'informazione storica totalmente falsa. L'emittente sarebbe stata un'iniziativa di Grace Kelly. Han pertanto chiesto a Grant Benson e Kevin Turner, ex DJ di Radio Caroline e cofondatori dell'emittente, di raccontarci la vera storia, che piacerà senza dubbio a tanti nostalgici dell'era eroica delle radio pirate. Questa è la frase incriminata riportata a questo indirizzo, fondata oltre 35 anni fa. Il Riviera Radio nacque da un'iniziativa della principessa Grace per servire la comunità anglofona lungo la Costa Azzurra. Da Monaco a Saint-Tropez, principessa Grace, cominciamo subito col dire che la principessa Grace ha avuto un ruolo nel broadcasting monegasco. Ha infatti personalmente acceso il primo trasmettitore TV VHF di Tele Monte Carlo negli anni 50 del secolo scorso, ma nessun ruolo risulta aver avuto nella vicenda di Riviera. Grant e Kevin, agosto 2026, Sovereign. Ecco dunque la storia completa di Riviera, narrata da Grant e Kevin.
We're here with I'm Grant Benson. We're here with my mate Kevin Turner, and we're talking a little bit about the very early days, or almost, if we like, the early days of Radio Sovereign on the Côte d'Azur and its metamorphosis into to Riviera Radio. Now, the reason I'm getting Kevin involved is that his memory is far superior to mine, and I think he was probably more instrumental in the whole project than perhaps I was. Now, Kev, you were working Radio Sovereign as we'll call it a pirate station in London,
yep,
with John Kenning.
Yep.
That was very successful for how long?
It came on the air in the spring of '83 and it finished...
Can I just turn your microphone over a bit?
It's fallen over.
It's fallen over, yeah.
Can you try
use
the magnet?
The magnet, slide it off, and there you go. And then we can get a better signal from you. Yeah, okay. Pick it up here. So it was on the air for what, a couple of years?
Less than a year, actually.
Right.
Spring '83, it ended on the 2nd of January 1984. I actually did the last programme. And John had already heard about English radio on the Côte d'Azur, broadcasting from Italy. And so he made an exploratory trip down.
Was that the one with me?
When I came
with him? All right, yeah.
Which I think was before Sovereign Twickenham had closed.
Yeah, you're right, because I remember that we came down, when we were talking about this the other day, we came down in his mini, had a great week. I totally sold the idea of the Riviera to him, which is not difficult, obviously. He saw the kind of the shambles that Radio Nova had become, the previous English language radio station. He saw that there was perceived a market, there to be a market down there. And we came back, and he actually offered me a gig on Radio Sovereign in London. So thinking back on it, Sovereign. So we digress a fraction there. So we came back. You had sold it to him initially. I confirmed it. And he then proceeded to wind up Sovereign London, I assume.
Sovereign Twickenham basically had to close because the game then was that even though the radio station didn't have a licence, the way the system worked was that they, well, for want of a better word, they raided you, they visited you, they made various measurements, took various notes, and went away and prepared a case for prosecution. That took 6 months.
All right.
And then what would happen, and Sovereign John Kenning had been to court once already, and all that they did was they paid a fine, a few £100s, slap on the wrists, and literally went back to the base and turned it all back on again. So it was a few hours off the air. What happened on the second court case that made John decide that he couldn't continue in London was that the judge ordered transmission equipment be confiscated, and this was the clincher for John, his very extensive and valuable record collection. That would have been seized as well.
Okay.
And John just wasn't prepared for that to happen. And so, as you say, the idea of doing radio on the Côte d'Azur had been put into his mind. And so really what we did was we packed up the entire radio station into a container and shipped it down to Italy.
Because I've been sent down as, I've been sent down as the pathfinder, if you like. I'd secured some property in Valle Crozia.
Yep.
I think we'd done a deal with the transmitter site just close to Bordighera, again very close to the French Riviera. I bought a transmitter from Milan. I remember driving. I didn't even know how to spell transmitter, let alone what I was looking for. But I had a wad of cash in my back pocket. Went up to Milan, bought a transmitter, came down. We had a local fixer, this guy Oscar Porfirio, who helped us with a lot of sort of the local logistics on the ground, so to speak. Obviously, what always strikes me a little bit is its youthful naivety. You know, we really hadn't got a clue what we were doing, or at least I speak for myself.
The incident that reminds me of that is when we came to put the aerial mast up. We got a couple of locals from a village that we used to live in, Siborga, to dig the hole. And it was meant to be a metre wide, a metre the other way, and a metre deep. And what we eventually got was, he was very enthusiastic at the start, so it was wider at the top than it should have been.
As a reverse pyramid.
Sort of, yes, exactly, reverse pyramid. And so when we came to fill it with concrete, we didn't have enough concrete. We'd got enough concrete if it had been the right dimensions, but because it was this peculiar shape, it was actually a bigger hole than it should have been. And I do remember chucking in boulders, old tree trunks, anything at all, just to sort of flesh it all out. But we did. We put the concrete base down, and we, as instructed, put these 4 bolts sticking upwards through it in each corner. And then when the mast eventually arrived from the UK, it was a Versatile, one of these wind-up jobs.
From a mate of mine, a guy called Ian Marshall. And
a very good mast it was too. Sadly, it had got bent during transit. I'll come back to that. Anyway, so we popped the base on and did up the nuts, and that seemed to work. And as you say, I think we gave quite a creditable impression of people that knew what they were doing. And then we had to attach these 3 dipoles to the top of the mast, and they came from a company in the UK called J-Beam, who very handily had supplied this little bit of paper as to what to do. And we
instructions, I think it's called.
I think you may be right. And we did stick to the instructions, and it said these must be spaced exactly such and such distance apart, and you must attach the cables in a certain way. And we did all that, but we, neither of us had put up an aerial like that before.
We weren't engineers.
No. So it was all sitting there ready to go, and as you say, the transmitter came down from Milan. You actually bought a very good transmitter, even if you didn't know it.
Yeah. I'd done good. I think I chose it by the pictures.
Yeah. The 2 big suppliers in Italy at the time were Itelco and Elpro.
Elpro. We went to Elpro.
We went to Elpro.
So I think they gave me sandwiches when I got there.
And it's
easy to buy me.
It came down on the back of a truck.
Right, yeah.
I always remember it completely exposed to the elements. They didn't seem to think, I suppose they thought, oh, well,
it's Italy summer, it doesn't rain. Yeah.
Anyway, they came down and they connected it all up. And I remember thinking, well, I hope it works, because if not, if you get an aerial wrong and you put a high-power transmitter, it goes bang, and you've done a lot of damage. And the man from Elpro seemed relatively happy with what we'd done, connected it all up through the switch. The meter went way over 2 kilowatts. And he looked at the what's called the reflective power coming back down. And he said, oh, yes, this is a very good aerial. Yes, I'm quite happy with this. And off he went. And even though the site, Bordighera Alta, wasn't as high as Siborga, where Radio Nova broadcast from, it was probably less than a couple of 100 metres above sea level. Siborga's about 500. Because it was on a little cap, a peninsula sticking out, it did very well. It got into pretty much everywhere.
So we were 104.1?
Yeah, 104.1.
Which was debatable whether it was in or out of the permitted band at the time, wasn't it? Because I think, wasn't it supposed to finish at 104?
It was supposed to, but there were some Italian stations sort of nudging up to 104.5-ish, something like that. And I do remember with the frequency, we had to go and do a little bit of negotiation with Radio San Remo, who, when we looked it all up, in Italy at the time, you registered your frequency as opposed to being given a license for it. And when we did the research, we discovered that even though in Bordighera and along the Côte d'Azur, 104.1 seemed clear, Radio San Remo had registered the frequency for somewhere the other side of San Remo, And so I remember we went over and had a quick chat with them, and they were very reasonable people.
I remember we sat down and it was a guy called Cremieux who was the owner of Radio San Remo, or was he one of Storia 103? But anyway,
And we said, this is what we're going to do. We don't think we're going to cause you any interference because our beam is literally the opposite direction, and Bordighera itself was hidden from his transmission area by another cap. So they said, go for it. And if it does cause interference, we'll let you know.
Because I think actually when you switched the whole thing on, I'd gone back to the UK. I'd gone back to Radio Carolines. I don't think I was around at that time. Correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, what was the signal like? You switched it on. I'm sure that being the anoraks that we are, the first thing you did was go down the coast and listen to it.
Absolutely right. We didn't have the link ready from the studio in Vallecrosia up to Bordighera, so we put a test tone out, simple test tone.
Because notoriously they always do better than music does in terms of modulation. Yeah.
And we jumped in John Kenning's MIDI and we drove down the coast. And he kept going, this is incredible, this is incredible. We went through Monton, we went through Monte Carlo, we got as far as Antibes, we went past Antibes, and it was still, there wasn't a problem with the signal at all. And so we spent the afternoon checking it out as far as we could. I can't remember how far we got, Cannes maybe, and it was still good there.
Did it get into Nice?
It got into Nice better than Nova had. It still didn't get deep into Nice.
Right.
But the bits of Nice that are on the coast,
and
a way in, I'd say nearly to the centre of Nice, but certainly no further than that. The signal was pretty good there, certainly, as I say, better than Nova's had been. And so we turned around and came back. A guy called Dave Bowman came down shortly after with the link for the studio.
I think I was around for that because we had to send a cable from the studio to the block of flats behind the studio where the uplink transmitter was. I was around for that bit. I remember that.
I can't remember who climbed onto the roof of that building.
Not me.
It certainly wasn't me either. I really don't. I don't do heights, and I don't think it was Dave. I think we might have persuaded somebody local.
Somebody local, braver than us.
Anyway, they went up and we established the link between the studio and the transmitter, and everything seemed to be going quite well. We were on the air. We came on at 6 a.m, which we later extended till 5, and I think we finished at about midnight or 1 o'clock, something like that.
So hang on, let's run through the on-air staff then.
Right. To start with, I did breakfast, which I think was 6 till 10. I think it was all 4-hour slots.
Okay.
I think then it was Mark Desani.
You're probably right. Who was previously on radio?
Previously on Nova. And Nova shut down literally a day or two before we came on with Sovereign. So he was available. John Kenning did the afternoon.
He was the owner, obviously.
And we'd had another guy come down with us called Mike Mendoza.
Oh, he was great. I mean, I'm still in touch with Mike. He went on to do LBC in the UK. Did quite well for himself. Talk radio.
He didn't stay around very long, but he certainly, I think he was there in the early days.
I think he's also a politician in the UK now.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, I could see Mike doing that. And then I think the Late Show was, I think that was Stuart Clark.
That would
come over from Ireland.
Who's now quite a big journo in Irish press, Irish music
press. I think is what he works for. So we had about 20 hours or so of broadcasting a day, and then there was a knock on the door about 3 weeks after we'd started, and it was a man from the state broadcaster, Rye, and he came in. He was very pleasant, but he said, "You're causing us problems up the valley."
That was the link transmitter.
Because it was a band 3 transmitter. Now, back in the UK, VHF television had long ceased to exist then, and we'd rather naively assumed that the frequency was clear in Italy as well. It
We had
didn't.
no idea. It could have been the police for all we knew.
It didn't wipe out Rye 3. It wiped the colour off of Rye 3 because we were right on the edge of the frequency. And he came in and basically said, "You're going to have to shift. You're going to have to shift, and you're going to have to stop this now." And that was obviously a huge blow.
So the station went off the air for a while.
Station went off the air, not for much more than a day or so, because lots of frantic phone calls. We found a small FM transmitter in San Remo. I think it may have even been Radio San Remo who helped us with it. And we established a new link from the studio up to Bordighera on 107 point something or other. And that just about did the job. It wasn't perfect, but it kept us on the air for a few weeks until Dave Bowman came back down with a new crystal for the link transmitter. And we moved from band 3, which in the UK was ITV, VHF. We moved to band 1, which was BBC, and actually was still used in this part of Italy for some of Rye 1 broadcasting. It's very, very mountainous part of Italy,
I know,
and it gets
Rye
around the
1
corners.
Until the advent of digital terrestrial broadcasting, Rye 1 was on VHF because it was considered to be sort of the backbone of communications. If everything else failed, you had strong VHF television signal throughout the country.
But we had done our research at the time, and we made sure we weren't on top of Rye.
So the station's up and running. Obviously, as I said, we didn't. We were all a little bit naive about what we were doing. John and all of us were involved to a degree in selling, but obviously it was always a struggle. So how long did the station go on for until John decided, no, I've got to get out?
We came on, I think it was just after Easter '84, and we ran through the summer. The summer was relatively okay because obviously the Côte d'Azur is full of tourists and fairly busy. And John was a good salesman, and he went up and down and sold adverts to restaurants and bars and a few shops here and there. I must admit, I think, we'd given him a list of old Radio Nova clients, and he managed to reel a few of those in. But we got into the winter, and things began to get really quite tight financially. In all fairness to John, the wages were always paid, but I know that he and Gilly, his partner, had to move out of their flat in San Remo because they couldn't afford it. And they found some temporary accommodation. I think it was a holiday chalet or something or other near to Ventimiglia.
That's one thing. I mean, I heard some quite horrific stories, about having that. They were having dinner out of a tin of sardines or what have you.
Or apparently jumping over the fence to the farm next door and helping themselves to eggs and spinach and things like that. Yeah, I think things did get a bit rough for him, and then we hit lucky. He managed to find an old Radio Nova salesman who we used to know as Cross-Eyed Tony.
He was also my mechanic for a while.
Right. Well, Tony was a very good salesman. I never quite understood how successful he was, but he was. And he managed to bring in some more clients and a bit more money and things. We got through Christmas and into the new year. But then springtime didn't really see an upturn in the tourism and in the business I think John had hoped for. But as luck would have it, an Australian businessman had checked into a hotel in Monte Carlo and he'd discovered Radio Sovereign and he'd been listening to it.
Now, this is the interesting phase. This guy's name was?
I think he was Steve Cosser.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Again, I'm going from my very sort of fractured memory here. He was involved with a swimwear company in Australia?
Yes, the company I believe was called Lintel or something approaching that. But they also had media interests as well.
All right, okay.
And so he was partly wearing that hat. He'd listened to Sovereign, he quite liked the output, and I think the output by that stage was pretty good. It had settled down. And he made contact with John and said he'd like to meet him. John went over to the hotel in Monte Carlo and basically the guy said, I've been in touch with my business partners back in Australia and we'd like to buy your radio station. And the figure they were talking about was quite substantial.
Go on, out with the money, out with the numbers.
It was pretty much £1 million.
£1 million. That's a hell of a... I mean, £1 million, we're talking 40 years ago, £1 million is an awful lot of money in those days.
Yeah, and I think
It still is today, but I mean,
I think to John it was absolute manna from heaven. You know,
I would
think
imagine that, from having to nick produce from the local farm to having somebody offering you £1 million in cash in a suitcase in a Monegasque hotel, that's quite a leap.
Yeah, we didn't actually give him the money straight away.
No.
He said, if we can agree terms, I'll go back to Australia, I'll finalise the deal with you, and then I'll come back. And I'd say within about 6 weeks or so, he was back with a suitcase full of money, or certainly that was what John was handed in a hotel room in Monte Carlo. They didn't buy him out completely at that stage. I think John kept 25%.
Was that to keep him involved, or...?
I'm not sure. I think John didn't want to relinquish it completely,
Fair enough, yeah.
But he'd realised that the deal was too good to turn down. And so I think pretty much he got £750,000, and he and Gilly went back to the UK. I also thought I'd been down on the Côte d'Azur by that stage on and off for 3 years. I thought, no, come on, you need to go back to the UK and see if you can get into UK radio properly there. So I went back, although a couple of months later, the Australians had brought in a very experienced chap called Aidan Day.
Who was involved with Capital Radio in London.
Yes.
Yeah. With his partner, Roger Manning, is that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And Aidan called me up, and I went up to see him at his place in, I think it was Kensington, somewhere near Kensington, with a view to me going back. And I was tempted, but I thought, no, I really want to see if I can do stuff in the UK. But at that point, the Australians were still only 75% owners, but that gave them complete control effectively. They'd got a guy called Andy Gemmell-Smith, who was well known in the UK
as an engineer,
as a radio engineer. He'd done offshore radio transmitter engineering and built up a very successful studio business called Alice Soundtech. And Andy came down and he changed the aerial system at Bordighera, and with a great flurry of publicity, the Australians rebranded the station as Riviera Radio.
Whilst it was still based in
Italy.
Okay, this wasn't always clear to me.
Within a year or so, they bought John's remaining 25% out. They called him up and just said, we want complete control, and they negotiated a figure. I think he got his 250,000 and a bit more on top as a sweetener. So they were in complete control by that stage. And I believe then the negotiations with Monaco started to actually move the station over there. They did a deal to get some premises down by the port, very close to, if not within, Radio Monte Carlo's.
It's in the same building. There's a whole row of buildings. There's some ships chandlers. It goes to where I think it's the yacht club used to be. There's the Rascasse at one end, bar.
Stars and Bars down the other.
I think it's gone now. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's practically in the same building. And so from that point, so that is basically the story of how Riviera Radio was born. I mean, as we know, Riviera Radio then went through a number of ownership changes. The Australians eventually sold out to Capital Radio. Yeah. And then I think the Barclay brothers involved.
Yeah.
There was a Swedish group involved, if I'm not mistaken. Then
Macquarie, I think, were involved at some stage.
Macquarie, I think, is Australian again, isn't it? Yeah, very big Australian industrial group. And then, of course, there was that the American group that had it fairly recently. They have a number of broadcast interests, minor broadcast interests in the States, to the current situation where it's
global.
Global, yes, exactly.
Or effectively Capital again.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole thing is coming in full circle. Because I remember there was a time, actually, I think Chris Tarrant from Capital Radio, for one summer, he broadcast his programmes from Monaco for Riviera Radio.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for a while, the sound on air was just like Capital. They'd taken the same jingles and re-sung or revoiced them.
Which is exactly what has happened now with Heart and Noble. Yeah.
And I think for a while, they were still broadcasting from Italy. They got the studio base in Monte Carlo sorted fairly quickly, and they then had to link back to Bordighera. But obviously the intention was, and eventually it happened, that they put a transmitter on the Monte which is the big 106.5 that you hear now, and a smaller one, 106.3 in the gardens, the Jardin, because obviously up on the Monte Carlo the signal is rather prone to fly over the top of Monaco than go into it. So they've got very good coverage. I mean, Radio Nova, Radio Sovereign, we always used to say from San Remo to Saint Tropez.
But it never got into the big metropolis.
No.
That's
No.
the problem.
The one thing that we did do with Sovereign, in spite of the fact that people were surprised about it, was we fairly swiftly, in the first couple of weeks, switched to mono. We discovered that mono travelled better
Yeah, a
than
lot of people have done that in
stereo.
Italy as well.
Yeah.
And if you put a pilot light on so that the stereo lights up on people's car radios, they're none the wiser.
Which we did.
Kev, thanks for that. I tell you, one of these days, we'll have to get perhaps some other people involved in this as well. Because there's also there's the Electro 108 chapter, which I was involved in. There was the Sunshine Radio, which our mate Mark Ditzani was involved with as well. Is anybody else that I missed? There was Coast, the religious station.
Yes, and they became great friends and very helpful too. It wasn't as if we were competing.
No.
We all helped each other out.
The devil and the deep blue sea at the other end. Kev, great, thanks for that. And
You're welcome.
talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Ta-ra.